What's up, guys? Pittsburgh Weiss Schwarz back again, coming at you with a brand new video. This one is all about Weiss Schwarz Jargon, not exactly official terms, but community-accepted terms for effects, cards, and all sorts of stuff that you might not know. These are all compiled by Kevin, who was the Anime Evo champion. He has been compiling and curating this list for a long time, and we'll have that linked in the description as well. We've added some additional terms, some more basic stuff, if you guys might not know, if you might be a newer player to the game. And I am joined today by Andy and Brian, as usual.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Hello.
Let's jump right in here.
Was that a reference to later in the video when we talk about runners? Oh, I won't spoil it.
Spoilers.
All right, yeah, first one, scrying. And this isn't a Weiss term. This is actually like universal card game terms I think we're starting out with. Scrying is just where you have an effect that lets you look at the top card of your deck and then put it back on top of your deck or on the bottom of your deck. So lots of Weiss cards have that. They write it out the whole time. Scry is actually a mechanic in Magic. That's where the term comes from. Super useful effect. On the card on the left, you'll see it just says Scry 2. And on the kioske on the right, it's about a sentence and a half. So if someone says, I scry when I play, look at the top, put it either back on top or on the bottom of deck.
All right, so in a similar vein to Scry, we've got Surveil, which is basically the same effect, but instead of having the option to put the card on the bottom of your deck, you have the option to put it into the waiting room, or in its home games terminology, Magic, you put it into your graveyard. So Surveil, just like Scry, they write out the entire effect on the Weiss card, look at the top card of your deck, put it back on top or into your waiting room. This effect is on a whole bunch of cards, also very useful, gives you information.
People sometimes mix these terms up too.
Scry
A lot of
and
people
Surveil.
just use scry as a universal term.
Moving on, we have Mill. This is another sort of like ubiquitous trading card game term. Originally from Magic, from the Millstone. Basically, you take either your or your opponent's deck and you take cards from it and you put them into your grave or your waiting room. Self-mill in Weiss is extremely common and it's very important as you want to get yourself to certain refresh timing, so milling yourself is very powerful. Brainstorm would be a mill for 4, to give you an example of how that's worded. You can see the Shoko here. She mills 2 on play, 2 cards immediately from the top of your deck into your waiting room. That would be a mill for 2. And you'll hear people say that all the time. They'll refer to mill effects and things of that nature, whether they are for you or for your opponent.
Next term we got is runners. These are basically just level 0s that have an effect that say, beginning of your opponent's attack phase, they can move to an open position on your center stage. This can be either from your center stage to another slot on your center stage. It doesn't have a character in it, or it could be from your back row to the front row. Some will even run from the front row to the back row. But basically just a card that moves to another open position on your field before your opponent's combat step. And sometimes they'll mill cards, sometimes they'll only run to the center.
Pay 1, run to back row. Right or left, you got stuff from Contai. There's all sorts of kinds of runs.
Pretty basic though. If it runs, it moves.
All right, up next, the reverser or the bomb is a blanket term for a card in Weiss that deals with the card across from it in combat without explicitly winning the battle. A lot of the time, this is on level 0. If they're red, they reverse the character across from it. If they're blue, they send to the bottom of deck. Yellow, they send to stock. Green, send to clock. They exist at any number of levels. Like I said, usually level 0. They also exist in the anti-change form, where if the character across from it is a higher level than your opponent's level, you can do some sort of removal effect to the card across from it as well.
Next, we got
Right, yeah.
drop search, drop salvage. This is a generalized term for just normal tutors in Weiss. They on play, pay 1, ditch a card, search or salvage a character and add it back to hand. And it's usually traded, pretty much always traded. There are staple filter cards. They show up in pretty much every single set, and most sets have multiple of them. Multiple colors, multiple different additional effects. As you can see here, the Kokoro is not only a drop search, but she also gets an additional soul when she's in the center lane. And the Saya is an on-play mill 2, while also being a drop salvage. These are pretty common examples of additional utility effects stapled to tutors, which is like a thing that people coming into Weiss you might see and you might think it's pretty crazy. You just have like these generalized tutors that just rip cards from other zones, but they are super, super common and they're super, super important for a lot of decks. So important to realize when someone says drop search, drop salvage, this is what they're talking about. Just pay 1, ditch a card, tutor from either zone, whether it is search or waiting room.
Cool. Next up, we got Riki's. This is a real Weiss term this time. I don't know what show that is, but the namesake card, I guess his name's Riki from Little Busters. Supposedly.
Mm-hmm.
These are very common effects. They're getting printed a lot more recently. They're very strong effects. Usually on a level 0, you, on play, will pay 1 and clock yourself from the top of your deck usually, and then search your deck or waiting room for a character and add it to your hand. Like everything else, there's a whole bunch of different variations of these, but Rikis are generally just speaking, on play or sometimes on death. Pay 1, clock yourself, get a character to your hand.
All right, up next, we've got Takitsubo, which is basically a Riki, but instead of performing the effect on play, it is rest itself, pay 1, clock top card, and then plus a character from some zone, whether that be your deck or your waiting room. These are not quite as common as Rikis, but they do exist. I don't know, again, like Andy, I don't know what this...
Railgun.
What is this? This is Railgun?
Yep.
Okay. The character's name is Takitsubo?
Yep.
There you have it, folks.
Isn't that the teacher?
She's in...
Or that one lady
Item.
who's the antagonist or whatever?
She's in one of the underground groups, dude. Railgun's got some fucked lore, like rail decks. It's quite some backstory. But she's in one of the like Academy City. Whatever. Why don't we talk about this next card? Okay, so here's a big one. Azusa Akatsuki. Most people are gonna say Azusa because it's shorter. But people who play mostly English might say Akatsuki, since Azusa is a JP printed card. Basically, it is on play, pitch any card, top check up to 4, and then take a traded character from among those 4. These are not printed as on play profiles anymore, this kind of effect. They're extremely strong. Main phase mill, just the raw hand filtering and mill power is crazy. However, people refer to all sorts of up to 4 type effects as Azusa or Akatsuki. So if you hear anybody say those terms, just be aware this is what they're talking about. The actual effect itself, pretty rare, but people will use this to refer to any top check 4 sometimes, even though it's typically just a level 0, pitch any card, top check up to 4, add a character.
But you're going to be using the term a lot, because
yeah.
People tend to play sets that have these in them, and when they do, they play 4 copies, probably.
Speaking of, Andy...
the next one is Chiyuri, in basically the same thing as an Azusa or an Akatsuki, but it's when it dies you do the effect instead. Again, don't be surprised if you hear some people refer to these cards as Azusas or Akatsukis as well, as the effects are very similar. A lot of overlap. They might just say like an Akatsuki on death or whatever, but Chiyuri is the technical term for the graveyard Akatsukis. Next card.
Next, we've got Amagi. Amagi is the term that is used to describe the effect that activates when a climax is placed onto your climax zone. The character controlling the Amagi is able to pay 1 stock, look at up to 4 cards from the top of their deck, and add a traded character to hand. Named after the Amagi pictured here from Kantai Collection.
Which Amagi is that, Brian? I need clarification. Which specific Amagi that is? Can you read that? Class, please?
That is the second something aircraft carrier Amagi. I can make the picture really big and we can find out, but yeah, commonly in the English metagame, you'll see this in Sorted Online with this Leafa Amagi. Other than that, I can't think of many recent sets that have Amagi. It's a fairly powerful effect that isn't printed too often. There is the clock self Amagi in Fujimi, yeah. But other than that, they are not printed. Definitely not every set has this effect.
And just as a note, the way Brian said it, and he didn't even intend this, but it's very common as to how players will refer to cards with these effects. He said the name of the character on the card, Leafa, and then the effect typecast that the community has put on it. So Amagi. So he said Leafa Amagi. That's what you're going to hear when you hear people refer to these kinds of effects. They're going to say the character on the card and then like the prototypical community name of the effect.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's
so
a very good example.
You'll hear like Rem Riki,
Mm-hmm.
Leafa Amagi, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Very common. All right, we can move to the next one here. All right, Rize. This is kind of newer to the English meta, I guess, relatively, but it's been in JP for a long time. It's a costless milling card that adds the card to your hand before you have to ditch. So on some timing, whether it's on death, on reverse, on play, you're going to look at up to usually 3 cards from the top of your deck, add 1 traded character, ditch the rest, then ditch a card from your hand. So you add before you have to ditch. Probably one of the strongest self-mill cards that you can have, especially if they're on play. It's a lot of deck manipulation. The fact that you don't have to pitch beforehand means that it's the same level of selection on your filtering as like an Azusa or something like that, but because you don't have to pitch first, you can be reactive in your sculpting after you go over it. They're very powerful. On-play Rizes are rarely ever printed, the first one here being from Gochiyusa, obviously. It's where Rize is from. But more common, especially in English, things coming over are on-reverse Rizes, like the Mai from Bunny Girl Senpai. That's a more common and more regularly printed effect nowadays versus on-play Rize, which I think the last one that we got was Memory Snow. Memory Snow has one.
Yep.
Memory Snow has a true Rize. If you play mostly English, also, usually we'll see this effect on like level 1s.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the Azusa Akatsuki effects, where some sets like, was it AOT has the level 1 Armin that is a
Rize,
Rize,
yeah.
Carmen Rize, yep.
or like the Sword Art Online, the one Kirito.
Yeah, he's an
That's
on death.
Look at 3.
As we go through the list, you'll see we have on some timing. If it's a card where there's many different kinds of timings for that kind of effect, that's how we'll denote it. Lines. But all right, we can move on.
Yepers, we got Koume, a Rize, but it's for climaxes, and these will look through 4 cards from your deck on play for a climax, and then add it to your hand, then discard a card. Strong effect, probably even stronger than just a normal Rize, because you have a million ways to search characters in this game, but almost no ways to get a climax into your hand on command. So these are very, very powerful effects, and very rarely do we see them printed. I think the only time we ever got this on a level 0 was the actual Koume from Idolmaster, which is on a massive restriction list for Idolmaster.
I think
And-
the most recent other one is Beaufree's gonna have one, but it's like on reverse. So like they've been very, very how to say it hesitant.
Cautious.
Yeah, very
They
cautious.
very rarely printed it after the original Koume, and now they're starting to, but with caution.
Yeah,
So,
on
like-
death or on reverse, never on play.
Yeah, in English, we're getting our first one here. I think end of this month is going to be this level 1 Darkness.
And Konosuba, yep.
Yeah.
She's on death.
All right. Speaking of Konosuba, up next we have the Kazuma effect. The Kazuma effect is when the character is played, pay 1 stock, discard a card from your hand, look at top 3 or up to 3 cards, and take anything from among them. To my knowledge, the effect is usually printed like it is here on the Kazuma and the Ron, just as a solo effect with no additional effects strapped on. Being able to take anything is pretty powerful.
Also, don't have to reveal.
Yeah, you don't have to show your
one.
opponent because you can take anything, so you don't have to prove anything to your opponent there. And this effect is seeing more printings as we get more sets going into the future here. So you probably will see this going forward.
It was like after Konosuba. I think literally every set after Konosuba gets one of these. These are in everything now. They're a very powerful consistency tool. Whether your set gets it as like in the booster or as like a promo, most sets get these eventually. They're like a consistency effect that Bushiroad really likes to print level 0s because they help you run event cards, help you get into climaxes if you really crutch on your level 1 combo. things like that. Next, cover it up.
Carmen!
Clean cut! We're talking about clean cut now. So this is another field-based plus, similar to a runner, like an oversize. But it cuts another card to the back row. So how that works is when this card reverses a character, choose one of your other characters, rest it, and move it to the back row. So this effect is active cross turn. If your opponent does like crash into it, you can do it on your opponent's turn. But what it does is even if another one of your cards is reversed or is already rested in the front row, you can take it and move it to the back row, effectively ensuring that card lives cross turn and you can swing with it the next turn. Clean cuts are really, really strong. They're a very unique sort of field plus effect, and unlike other field plusing cards like oversizes and runners, they hold their value all game because you can clean cut any card later on. So if your opponent leaves you lanes that your clean cuts, and these clean cuts typically swing in for large powers, the Kirito here swinging in at 3,500 for a level 0, you can get that reverse and pull back even one of your larger characters to make sure it lives another turn. So super, super strong effect. A lot of sets get these, but they are not in everything. You should definitely familiarize yourself with what sets have access to clean cut, even if they're vanilla clean cuts, like the original clean cut we see here, which is where the actual name comes from. Clean cut, it's the name of the card. Even if they're 2,500, you should familiarize yourself with what sets have them, because they can be pretty devastating even in the mid and late game if you're not prepared for them.
Those also important, I think, is the fact that series with clean cuts are going to be the ones that are like really trying to tri-field you early and push a lot of damage quickly.
Yeah, they're very good at allowing you to aggressively push and tri-field.
Level 0 game, yeah, for sure.
So you can expect a lot of aggression early on from those sets.
If you're a deck that loves playing clean cuts, you love to go second. That is just the general rule, because you can field more than one character.
Yeah, next one we got coin flippers. They're called coin flips because beginning of your opponent's turn, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a something meets the condition, the card returns to your hand. I guess coin flip just generally means it's like a 50-50. I think that's generally speaking what the odds are.
About, depending on your build. About 50-50.
Generally speaking, it's going to be about a 50-50, whether this pops back to your hand or not.
They can occur on different timings. Some of them are on reverse, like the Lancer here. He's on reverse, you reveal. There are some level 1s that have on reverse, they reveal, and they can like either rest themselves or pop back to hand. You'll hear coin flip used to refer to all these kinds of effects. But the most common one for sure is the level 0. If you reveal a level 1 or higher, it pops back to your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
More recently too, like going to memory, like
yeah,
Slime and Seikano. I think there's like coin flip to send to memory.
Or yeah. There's they're like the 2,500s where you reveal top, and if they're a character, they go to memory when they die instead of just getting discarded. Moving on.
All right. Up next, we have the Haruna Encore, or the zombie effect. This effect activates during your Encore step when you have no other rested characters. The character with the zombie effect allows you to pay 1 stock and rest it. The requirement being that your other 2 lanes either don't exist or are reversed. This effect is printed on just about every level worth of cards, or just about every level. Frequently level 0s, but the more often than not, up until this point in the English metagame, you'd see it on the 2/2 Lisbeth, the standby target, and Sword Art Online. I don't think Sword Art plays standby quite as much anymore, but that used to be the big zombie effect in English.
Is zombie an actual term people use, or is that just one that we made up?
I have heard people outside of us call them zombie, but Haruna Encore is the actual name of the effect. So I put zombie on here just to be as clear as possible. Haruna Encore is what most people would call the effect, I think, in the scene.
Okay, yeah, because I remember, like, you're the first person I heard use that term, Carmen.
Oh,
and I thought you just made it up.
I heard it from someone else. I heard it from someone on Discord. They called it a zombie, like the Lisbeth, and I was like, oh, okay. So, who knows? Who knows where it came from? If you know, let us know in the comments where that come from. But I think Haruna Encore is real.
Here in Pittsburgh, we call them zombies, and if you call them anything else, you're wrong.
I don't know who Haruna is.
It's that character right there from
It's a
Kontai.
boat.
The boat.
No,
All right,
No.
whatever.
moving on. We got JC. So JC refers to. I'm gonna murder this.
Chugakuse.
Chugakuse? Yosei Chugakuse? Middle school girl in Japanese, referring to middle school girl Shinobu. When another of your characters is front attacked, you may pay one, sack, or send this card to memory. Return that character that was front attacked to your hand. This is a far more common effect in JP than is in English. In English, we really only have like the Bat Clan, we have the Cardinal and Alicization that can only be played with Fluctlight characters. But if you play JP, you undoubtedly know about JCs. Probably probably hate to see it when you queue into Saikano and Gersaya because they have some of the strongest ones ever printed. Where instead of sacking themselves, they go to memory instead. The effect can be. It's always been very strong, but it can be almost really oppressive in some metagames. The effect is really, really strong. They put Monogatari on the ban list. Yeah.
If
She's
you play it
unbanned
JP,
now, though.
Yeah,
if
she
you-
is
If
unbanned.
you play JP format, then you know there's tons of sets that will have these, but in English, definitely be aware that a lot more sets are getting them going forward. If you run any sort of on reverse combo, it's a real pain in the ass to see these because they can work from the back row too.
Mm-hmm. They can activate from anywhere.
Yeah, I guess something to note is for a while I heard people referring to this effect as Shinobu or as Bat Clan, but JC seems to be the newer, more widely accepted term that seems to be going around.
Yeah, JC is definitely what I've always heard the effect as. I've always heard it called as JC.
Oh, okay, then that might have just been a local
Wait,
thing
is this character named Josei Chugoski or it's
It's middle
Shinobu.
school. If you in Japanese, it is middle school girl Shinobu. Oshino Shinobu. That is the name of the card.
Oh, so it's like, which half of the
that-
card do you want to refer to it as?
Right.
That's where it came from. JC. Josei
I gotcha.
Chugakuse. But yeah, really strong. You'll see more of this going forward. Definitely a term to familiarize yourself with. If a set gets one of these and people are talking about it, that's why. Effect's crazy. God forbid they go to memory. All right, moving on. Back to Andy.
Yep, we got a Shimakai, which is the shortening of the original card's name, Shimakaze Kai. On attack, you choose one of your other characters. Can't choose itself. You give it 500 times the number of other characters on your field. So, on attack, you can give something else up to 2,000 power. Pretty common effect. You see it a lot. It's usually on like a common or an uncommon. It's definitely kind of dated. You don't see it like a whole lot anymore. I'm sure it was a lot better when it, just came out, but it's kind of been people will just ho hum when they see this effect. But it is a term to be familiar with. Shimakai or generally just is something that'll give 500 power times number of other characters, I believe.
It's a lot faster than just saying 500 times my field. For
Yeah,
an
usually I'll
additional
just be
2K.
like, oh, it's giving, I'll count and be like this much power.
But
This is a term that confused the shit out of me for so long.
mhm.
Because there's like another type of
Oh.
card called Shimakaze. I don't speak Japanese, so it was very confusing to me.
I
But
don't
just
speak, I don't speak
Shimakais
boat,
give 500 power times.
I don't speak boat.
Yeah. Lots of boat terms. Moving on. Right.
Speaking of dated effects, we've got this this trial deck effect. The Apple Bond effect generally refers to a card that on play, pay one bonds to a usually level 1 card from your waiting room, and then gives that level 1 card some amount of power during some player's turn or both players' turns, depending on the card. Originally printed in Madoka, with Kyoko shares an apple, which is why it's called Apple Bond. Some players will call anything that bonds for 1 stock an Apple Bond, however, so you may hear that occasionally. Usually you'll see this effect as a pretty much a pack filler effect in TDs. You will very, very rarely see this in competitive decks nowadays. I'd be very surprised if you did.
Yeah, I remember I was playing against like JP Cardcaptor Sakura, and they called like the one Tomio bonder, which is like a pay one bond to the finisher. They were like, "Oh, Apple bond to finisher," and I was like, "What?" So like people will use it for any pay one.
Yeah, any sort of like plussing bond effect. Bond is just the generic term for. Well, it's a keyword in Weiss to when you play the card with the bond effect, you add back a specific character from your graveyard to your hand.
Usually for ditch a card, but since this one's pay one, the first one was the Kyoko shares an apple, therefore it's an apple bond.
Right. Yeah, I personally wouldn't call like bonding to some random thing an apple bond. I'd just say, on play, pay one bond to this card from waiting room. But if you want to call it an apple, that's on you.
All right, Shimakaze or Marika. So any on reverse selected plussing combo. These are usually from deck. Shimakaze reverse the ones from deck. Marika referring to the ones from waiting room. They're on reverse with the climax, so they have to kill the character in front of them. Typically only go up to like 7k with the climax. Old ones only go to 6. Pretty dated. However, Bushiroad loves to continue to print these as all the way up to double rares. The best part about them is that they are selective. Typically, these days are at least printed on plussing climax triggers instead of being printed on random ones. Wind or shot or whatever. They're at least on good triggers. But many players will use Shimakaze to refer to either version, whether they are from deck or from grave, even though ones that salvage from grave are technically Marika's, which are the first one that was ever printed in Nisa. But yeah, pretty simple at this point in the Weiss like sort of life cycle of the entire game. This is a very prototypical climax combo effect.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is sort of the baseline for plussing
Every set
climax
has
combos.
And don't you dare call it a Marika. I won't know what you're talking about. I've never heard that before right now.
Yeah, the salvage ones are Marika's. Heard that a lot, actually.
Don't try to be fancy and impress them with, your terminology. You're using some, like, uncommon climax combo. Shut up, Shimakaze.
Yeah, we don't like Nisekoi.
I like Nisekoi. All right, next card. Back to Andy.
All right, we got what the hell show is this?
That's Toyu Pop.
What is that? Is that called is that a balaclava? Is that what they're called? Or wait, what are they called?
That's his hair.
Toy. No, the fucking toy he has in his hand, not his hair.
The thing we have to get the ball into the little hole.
Well, you get the ball in the
cup. I don't know, the ball in the cup
balaclava?
game. No, a balaclava is a face covering.
Oh, that's the face covering. It has ball on the name, so it confuses me. Dude, someone came in the store the other day and they had one of those, like, called it a balaclava, and they're like, no, dude, it's whatever it's called. I forget what it is. Oh, dude, those things are sick. But anyway, I guess this guy's name is Maguro. Refers to on climax combo. When you attack with the card, you look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck and add a character to your hand from among them. The rest go to your waiting room. These are generally really nice combo effects to have on climax combo at level 1, I think. As they allow you to both mill through your first deck, which is generally speaking very uncompressed, and you want to get to your second deck as quick as you can. And the fact that it doesn't require a reverse is really nice as well, especially with things like JCs becoming more popular. Yeah, never heard of this kid Maguro before. You've probably seen this card either on the Amelia from ReZero or the the Yukina from
Crystal Song. Yeah.
Crystal Song, Yukina from Bang Dream. Those are like the 2 most common ones, probably.
Yeah, Maguro from Puyo Pop was the first, so he gets the name. He gets the namesake. All right, Brian, next card.
Anyway, we've got Minami up next, which is basically Maguro, but instead the effect requires a reverse to get your top 4. Take one from among them. But in addition to that, you also get to choose another one of your characters and give it 2,000 power until the end of turn. So despite the fact that it needs a reverse, it allows you to potentially win board by snowballing your other lanes. But aside from that, it is basically an on-reverse Maguro.
Moving on, we got Twin Drive, which is a term that comes from Card Fight Vanguard, which is on grade 3 and higher units. They can perform a trigger check twice. I don't know if that's like all the time on grade 3 or higher, if it's just commonly printed on grade 3 or higher.
They all have it.
Yeah, they all
Carmen,
have
it
Twin
must
Drive.
have like pained you having to look this up for this video.
Yeah.
I think I'm the only one of us who's actually played Card Fight Vanguard.
I was trying to like do research. I was like, "Oh, is it like grade 3 and higher?" It's like, ugh, like the
Dude,
dark
everyone
arts.
makes it out like Weiss is such a difficult game to teach people, but like I came from playing Card Fight Vanguard and learning Weiss Schwarz is like super easy. It's like you trigger cards the same way, you cancel damage the same way, or similar way.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a pretty similar game.
But Twin
That's
Drive,
enough of me flexing.
Twin Drive in Weiss is a crazy strong ability. So on attack, you pay 1, and if you do, perform the trigger step twice. So it's stock neutral. You don't gain any additional stock for doing this effect. However, this is one of the strongest effects for allowing you to pay out trigger climaxes during your battle phase. So ideally, or especially if you're running a deck that's running 8 plussing triggers, like 8 doors, or now with choice in the mix, and things like that, you can really generate a lot of value with Twin Drives, with how crazy the triggering climax ability go. Especially, God forbid, if your set has some sort of climax trigger support, which a lot of sets are getting now. So yeah, Twin Drive's a really strong effect. You'll hear people call it Twin Drive instead of saying, especially in English, the ridiculously long amount of text, because Weiss just hates printing keywords. But yeah, strong effect. Really good for paying out climaxes. You'll see it more and more often. Pretty much every set gets a Twin Drive now. Been pretty ubiquitous. That started getting printed.
Kind of interesting. Like looking at this stuff kind of now. Like Vanguard, right? Like they create their. I think they create their own terminology, like from the top down. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
them, the company, they created the term Twin Drive for their game, whereas a lot of the Weiss Schwarz terminology is community made.
Whereas we just stole it from the other Bushiroad card game. But yeah, I mean it's the same thing.
Or like
so
just
why
in
wouldn't
general,
we?
like what Weiss Schwarz didn't make the terminology for what's a Maguro. That's not like a keyword on a card. You
Nope.
know?
It's just
Player
the first
made.
character who had the effect. But yeah, I guess you'll see that. I guess that's a comment to say. It's like obviously these are all like character names and stuff, and that's because the first printed character with that name just gets to have that effect name forever emblazoned in the community jargon, which is kind of cool and also kind of annoying for new players, which is why we have this video. Moving on back to the top, we got
Yeah. How about you just Twin Drive and go again, Carmen? Because you have way more experience with these ones than I do.
Okay, so we got Oboro. Oboro is a profile. It's a level 1 plus in climax profile, where either on play of the climax or on attack, it gains 2 abilities. Mostly that it ensures its own plus by when it's front attacked, it pops back to hand, and also gains Twin Drive, so pay 1 on attack trigger twice. What this does is it allows you to effectively side attack other level 1s if you can't kill them, because these don't typically get very big, only going to 6-5 or sometimes only 55 if they're on a stock soul, where you can side your opponent, Twin Driving, triggering additional soul so you keep up with damage, and then your opponent can no longer get a reverse on any of the lanes you combo in as the cards pop back to hand. Although they only ensure their own plus, basically being a field plus, with the right trigger lineup, Twin Drive can be strong, and dependent on the meta, if the meta is reliant on reverses, the Oboro style can be very strong. The first version of which being printed in Uragi Yuna. Yuna and the Haunted Hot Springs, got the Oboro, the Ninja Girl. She just pops back to hand and gains Twin Drive. Other common ones will be the Kato from Saikano, which is off bar, one of the most egregious ones. You can imagine the way that Twin Drive and bar interplay. And the Megumin from Legend of Crimson, which, when combined with the back row Brainstorm Soul support, can side for crazy numbers, even without ever getting a reverse and ever having to front at all. You'll see this combo show up a lot more as sets go forward. Bushiroad really likes printing this. They're non-interactive. They're very strong, depending on the set. Weirdly, probably weakest in its original set, Yuna. Most people opting to play other combos, but especially in Saikano and Konosuba, those decks are really crutching off this card now.
You know that it's kind of like an unimpressive effect when you first read it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't give you a selective plus. It's like, why would I want this Oboro back, or why would I want this Megumin back? But with the variety of other effects we've seen up to this point in the video, like drop searchers, and there's tons of ways to filter cards in and out of your hand and turn any one card into any other card. So
Right, exactly.
even if you don't want the Megumin again or the Oboro again, you can just turn it into something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely when you read it, it doesn't sound as strong as they are. And it really does depend on the set. Like I said, in Yuna, Oboro wasn't that great. There wasn't a lot of ways to do much with the card, but in something like Saikano, something like Konosuba, there's a lot of ways to leverage the card, leverage that plus into something better, as well as denying your opponent from ever getting a reverse. Ever. Because these combos are very easily looped, because obviously the card comes back to your hand. So. Notably, they are, what is it? You don't have to pop them back, so if your opponent's crashing, you can also leave them, so it's up to you.
You can leave it up and win a lane, yep.
Moving on.
I'm going to cuck you on this one, Brian. I'm going to take the... I know what this one is. Musashi's, one of my favorite things. Named after Musashi, Contact Collection. These are off finishers. Usually they're thrown in as like... You have your finisher combo, level 3, and then maybe if they don't have a reverse in their other lane, you can use a Musashi there. Musashi effects are on the turn they're played. When your opponent cancels the attack, you mill a card from your deck, and you deal X plus 1 damage to your opponent, X being the level of the card you milled. So it's a nice way to assure damage in the later stages of the game, because even if your opponent cancels the attack, you're still probably going to deal some damage with it. And though you probably don't know what damage you're dealing, because you can't really check the top card of your deck in the combat step probably, it's costless, so that's why they're good off finishers, because even if your finishing combo is kind of expensive, the Musashi effects usually trigger for free.
This effect always mills a climax to burn 1.
It does.
Then you die.
No, it doesn't. It mills a level 3 and you hit him for 4. And you're like, wow, bet you're happy you canceled that 2 and took 4, idiot.
If you've been playing Weiss long enough, you've definitely heard this term.
Yeah, this is a pretty common one.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the most common, most ubiquitous community terms is Musashi, and it's because Kantai's been around for a long time in both languages, so makes sense that it's as common as it is, no matter what. All right, we'll just go to Brian. We'll start over.
Well, it's my turn anyway, and I get to talk about one of my favorite card types in Weiss Schwarz. So the
Really?
stand and swap. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian loves standing.
Oh, that's darkness.
Yeah,
I remember now. I'm getting flashbacks.
The stand and swap ability is similar in timing to the runner ability. It allows the character with the effect to pay 1 at the start of the opponent's attack step and swap its field position with any one of your other characters, front or back row, and stand both of the characters. So you're able to play some fun combat tricks with this ability and potentially screw your opponent out of whatever they're trying to do. Unfortunately, the effect isn't commonly played. Most people don't like the effect as much as I do.
It's really a build-around effect.
Yeah, but to each their own. You really do need to build your deck around supporting the card that's going to be swapping around for sure, though.
The most common one you'll probably see as a player in like any Western country is probably the Mikasa. Just because of the popularity of AOT. And as the meta shifts and changes, AOT sort of reverts back onto this early play because it's not conditional on anything else, depending on what's being played. So you have the greatest chance to see this Mikasa. That's probably the most common one. I guess the Bang Dream one still runs around, depending on the build. That's also a good card.
Yeah, that's from like Bang Dream Set 1 though. So if Toilet's $40, how much is this card? Jesus.
Like $6.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Is
no
it
one
just like
plays.
a double rare?
No one plays standard.
It is a double rare, but everybody plays
Oh.
Toilet.
All right, moving on. We got Bodyguard, great performance. So this is an actual Weiss keyword. This is a real thing. So Bodyguard is just the Japanese translation of the effect before any card with the effect got printed in English. So you'll hear people use these interchangeably. They'll call it Futaba Bodyguard, Reinhardt Great Performance, things like that. So what this does is all lanes tilt inwards, because these cards are usually put in the center, and they must attack that card. And it doesn't matter what ability, what type of attack you declare, it becomes a front attack, and you attack this card. Most of these also have a sort of offensive ability where when the character becomes reversed, they can pay some cost and burn you. And they can have a bunch of other abilities. Obviously, Reinhardt, we're not going to get into it, but he's a giant wall of text. If you want to have a good laugh, you can go read him. But yeah, really strong. Usually over-centralizing abilities in the decks that they're played in. ReZero notably being one of the only decks that can sort of splash this card in and hope to resolve it. Most decks that have great performance or have Bodyguard really make it their core game plan, like English Bunny Girl and the Futaba. So just something to watch out for. Great performance.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is the do you have to be in the center position of the stage for that?
Yes.
Or the actual great performance effect?
The
Great
great performance
performance
card,
/ Bodyguard.
The great performance card has to be in the middle position. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if it's
Yeah.
not in like if it's like in a
Weirdly,
side
that is not
lane-
printed as clarifier text on any of these cards.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is true. You have to be center. Back to
Interesting.
Andy.
Yeah. Got Futaba, named after Futaba from Persona 5. These are level 0s, usually 1,000 power. On play, you reveal top card of your deck. If it is a character of a specific trait, that card goes underneath the Futaba as a marker, and then it gets plus 1,500 power and a level. So most of the time, you're going to hit the effect, because your deck's pretty much made up of all characters of the same trait, I'm hoping. And so it's a level 0, 3,500 level 1. Really, really strong card to have as far as like field plussing level 0s go. Probably the strongest, I would think.
One of the strongest oversized profiles.
Yeah, because they're oversized. 3,000 is generally like a threshold at level 0 power. So if you're at 3,000 or more power, it's reasonable that your character might live back to your turn.
Right.
And the fact that this card gets a level also means that it doesn't die to bomb or reverser effects, which commonly see play at level 0 as well.
There are also versions that don't gain the level and get an extra 500 power. Those are a bit more common these days, but both versions of the effect are pretty much everywhere. Also notable, you don't have to marker the card, so it's one of the few oversized profiles that can have value later in the game. Either markering a card and moving it for a 5-card brainstorm or informing you of your trigger, which, depending on your set, can be very powerful.
Up next, we have the Revenge Trigger effect, which is any effect that activates when another one of your cards, the player playing the cards is reversed. Majority of the time, this will be giving one of your other characters some amount of power, sometimes 500, sometimes 1,500. I see both of them fairly frequently. But aside from that, I don't think there's much more to say about this effect.
Yeah,
Just,
pretty simple.
Assign power when one of your characters becomes reversed.
Yeah, people will call it just revenge trigger, revenge power, all sorts of. I think the most common one that people probably remember if you've been playing Weiss a good long while is probably Railgun, the deck that's probably sort of carried by that kind of effect. Common in English and ReZero if they're running the Betty Brainstorm.
The Betty Brainstorm.
Yeah, that's probably where it comes up the most. If you've ever been like got by the clean cut being 4K and not being 3.5, probably the most common time you've run into that effect if you're an primarily English player. But yeah,
there's also I don't know what they're called. You'd probably know, Carmen. there's some like when you reverse your opponent, you assign the power, kind of Minami style.
Yeah, there is the like when when you get a reverse, you give another one of your lanes power. That one's even rarer than this one.
Yeah.
Not printed very often at all, and usually in very small increments of power. But
Do people call those revenge triggers, or do they call them Minamis? What do
it
people
doesn't
call
really have a name. They'll just say like roll power is what I've heard more often than not, and that's like I can count on one hand how many times I've run into that kind of effect. Not very common at all, but definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah, because the revenge triggers seem kind of rare to start with, and then
They're not
the
common
more
at all.
snowbally offensive ones, when you get the reverse, are like, I can't even think of a card off the top of my head that has it.
Yeah, I remember the effect, but it's hard to remember a card that gives that effect. Moving on here, we have damage reflect. So this is any sort of effect that allows you to reflect the damage you just took that was not canceled back on your opponent. Common ones with this in English that you might have seen as examples are the Swimsuit Arisa from Bang Dream and the Darkness from Set 1 Konosuba. It's a very uncommon but pretty powerful effect. You can just turn it back on your opponent. They might not be expecting to eat damage on their turn while they're still trying to fix their deck state. You can screw your opponent on their deck state if they're trying to go for perfect refresh and stuff, as they'll have to take damage mid-combat. So not a common ability, but definitely a powerful ability. Only works if you don't cancel. So.
That feeling when they swing with their blue eyes white dragon, and you flip up your magic cylinder.
Your magic cylinder, yeah.
Yeah.
I always thought magic cylinder when I see these effects. Like that's the first thing. Like
it is really similar, yeah.
Unfortunately, these effects don't negate the damage you just took, but
no, you do have to take the damage, live, and then you get the chance to reflect. But probably the Swimsuit Arisa is the most common one that you'll see, since it can like come out from a 2/1 when it gets front attacked or something like that. But it's definitely a super uncommon effect nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But
sometimes you even
see
it as like a climax combo.
Yeah, they'll call it like reflector, damage reflector, all sorts of things. I've heard someone say damage mirror before to regional, so just something to keep in mind, this kind of effect.
Just use whatever synonym you want. Let's get creative with it.
Back to the top, back to you, Andy.
Alright, this is damage scrying. Shoutouts to the first card in the video. Scrying makes triumphant comeback.
Except it's not scrying.
It's not actually scrying, yeah.
It's actually surveilling.
Mm-hmm.
See, I told you, no, I mentioned that in the video too. People call them the same thing.
You did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, these are usually printed on like level 3s. They're usually like more back row-y cards. Like the Goblin Slayer Witch you see off to the right, that have the effect that when you take damage from your opponent's effect, or I guess it doesn't need to be an effect. When you take damage from your opponent on your turn, or on your opponent's turn, god damn it, when your opponent attacks you and you eat the damage, you get to look at the top card of your deck, and put it either back on top of your deck if it's a climax, or put it in your waiting room if it's not a climax. So, if you ate shit on the first attack, hopefully this will help you not eat shit on the second attack.
Mm-hmm. You can dig yourself closer to a cancel.
Hopefully. For me, whenever I play these, they just dig more clean cards and I eat more clean damage. So, I don't know. I've never experienced damage scry working. It is weird that it's damage scry and not damage surveil, but I guess in reality, I guess Sal was a thing stateside before Surveil was a thing. That's Guilds of Ravnica. Like, so people called it damage scry. But yeah.
I mean, they used to print this effect like a lot on cards that you put in the front row, right? Like I know Idolmaster has some shitty level 3 with the effect.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time it just doesn't really seem worth playing these cards over just like a normal healer. The Sao one, Yui sees a lot of play because it has a lot of other really
She's a super toolboxy card,
Yeah.
I also saw this ability referred to as check and wreck, which is metal as fuck. And although I has never heard someone refer to it as that, I think we should make a community effort to call this effect check and wreck. Because that is fucking sick. Check and wreck is so much cooler than damage scry.
Where's the wreck come into play though?
Yeah, you remove it. You remove
you're
it.
Checking,
Goes to grave.
You're checking so you don't get wrecked.
Yeah, well, you check it, and if it's not a climax, you wreck it.
You wreck your card.
Yeah, it goes to grave. We can move on. All you, Brian.
All right, Fumio.
Oh no.
The Fumio effect refers to any effect that shuffles your opponent's waiting room back into their deck minus some number of climaxes, whether it's usually 1 or 2, depending on the set that it was printed in. This effect is an extremely powerful decompression tool to get the clean cards in your opponent's waiting room back into their deck, especially if you're playing a 2-climax Fumio, like the Konosuba Aqua printed here. Which allows you as the player playing the Fumio to potentially stick higher amounts of damage by putting clean cards back into your opponent's deck and not climaxes so that they can't cancel.
Fumio's disgusting.
It is.
Originally printed in Girlfriend Beta. Realized to its maximum potential in Konosuba. Really, really strong decompression effect. Probably not as directly feels bad as Stock Swap, since you can play around it a little better. Yeah. But definitely extremely powerful effect.
No, when it just runs you over, it's rough.
There ain't nothing worse.
There definitely aren't too many effects in Weiss that allow you to directly interact with your opponent's hand or deck.
Yeah.
Anything along those lines. So this is one of the only ones.
These exist at level 2 as well as 1-card Fumios. You'll hear people say 2-card or 1-card Fumio, referring to the number of climaxes that you will leave out. So just sort of heads up on that. How people refer to variations of the effect. Some you will choose, some your opponent will choose. Some they can be any card. Other ones they must be climaxes. Bushiroad is very inconsistent with this.
Mm-hmm.
And they will be for a variety of costs. So make sure you read the specific wording on your specific Fumio or your opponent's, because they definitely aren't as cookie cutter as you'd think.
Yeah. What sets have the level 2 Fumios? I know they have the 1-climax Fumios at level 3 in Love Live Sunshine and in Bang Dream.
English Card Captor Sakura has
the English exclusive Card Captor Sakura has one.
Okay, I see.
There are a couple other JP sets that have 1-card Fumios, level 2.
Flexing those English exclusive level 2 Fumio muscles, Bushiroad.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the best cards in the set, probably. It's not even a Sakura. It's
and no one talks about it.
I don't know.
Like her mom's friend, I think. Alright, moving on. Another decompression tool, Stock Swap, Stock Wash. Original printed in Idolmaster. I don't remember the exact name of the card, but that was the first Stock Swap. So it's a decompression tool that allows you to immediately rip your opponent's stock away, and they must replace it with the same number of cards blindly from the top of their deck. So depending on your opponent's deck state, if they're at the end of their deck, you know there's climaxes left in there, it's guaranteed ripping climaxes out of their next deck, forcing them to refresh. There are variations of this effect, most notably Seizure or Foreclosure, which is a variation of Stock Swap that rips their stock away immediately, but they don't put it back blindly until the end of their turn, disallowing them from paying for any climax combos during their battle steps. That's played as backup. There are lots of variations of the effect, but it is similarly across the board an effect that a lot of people dislike because it directly hates on what is and still was and still is the correct version of playing Weiss, which is making sure your stock is clean, compressing your following deck. It's an effect that when it was first printed, definitely lots of uproar, lots of discussion about it. Does this punish good play too well? Blah blah blah. There are plenty of ways to play around it. Definitely don't throw your hands up, but it is very strong. You have to be very aware of sets that have this 2-1 sort of instant stock swap. A lot of English players will call this buns for luck. Notably, the red Bang Dream version of the effect. because a lot of people will refer to seizure or foreclosure as sort of its own thing, since it is so powerful in that deck in Konosuba.
I mean, it's even getting played on character cards now too.
Mhm.
I think the Yui that we talked about on the damage scry slide, I believe she.
She is also a stock
Stock
swap, yes.
Yeah, she's ditched 2 stock swap on play.
But a lot of the more recent Japanese sets too have been moving to stock swap finishers. I know
Yeah.
2 of the stronger decks in the game right now, Fruits of Grisaya and Data Live, both have
Mm-hmm.
stock
On
swapping
attack,
effects
stock
on the
swaps.
finisher combos.
Yep. They can be very powerful, even more so when you can do them reactively, whether that is through a counter or during the battle step. But a very powerful effect.
I feel like it's the one thing that really makes, well, at least me, it's the one thing that makes me really change up my game plan.
It's the
Like-
great equalizer. Stock swap.
Yeah, like you
It
really
is,
have to
yeah.
like alter your game plan
Mhm.
far in advance if you know your opponent has these, because you can't just, rest on your laurels with your massive amount of clean stock.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely
Yeah.
familiarize
Out.
yourself with which sets in your meta have the ability to do this.
For sure. 'Cause,
is
yeah,
it-
if this catches you off guard, it's gonna get messy.
Yep. One of the most powerful effects to be blindsided by, but knowing about it in advance can very much nerf the impact of the effect.
Because knowing is half the battle.
Mhm.
All right, next card we got Icy Tail. This is another sort of finisher effect. I think there are a lot of times off finishers actually nowadays, or is that just Data
Nowadays.
Live being broken?
Nowadays they are printed as off finishers, but back in the day, the
Yeah.
only Icy Tail was Icy Tail Michiru from OG Saikano. It's crazy to think that that was the finisher of choice for that set back then, with now it being so crazy. But
Yeah, but anyway, Icy Tails are effects where you will mill cards from the bottom of your opponent's deck. So send cards from the bottom of your opponent's deck to their waiting room, and then you burn your opponent for the number of climaxes they hit. So if your opponent, let's say, has a lot of stock and has a deck state with a lot of climaxes and not too many cards, you can really screw them over if you just mill all their climaxes and then burn them for a big amount of damage. And since they don't have climaxes because you milled them, they're probably going to eat the damage. It's a very rude effect.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
very
Also kind of
disrespectful.
changes. Yeah, also kind of changes the way you maybe approach the game state like a stock swap will, because they can turn your compression against you.
It's definitely an important effect to exist with like the way Weiss tracked over time, with like compression heavy strategies becoming so powerful, like where decks do nothing but heal and compress. Right? You need to have a effect that sort of hates on that in a way. Icy
See-
Tail, some might argue, is not a great way to interact with it, but it is an effect that works.
It is a way to interact.
Yeah, it is a way to interact with it, which is the important part.
Probably one of the better ways to punish memory decks, I would imagine.
There are lots of variations.
Unlike stock, which you can pay out in an emergency, your memory's kind of stuck there.
hmm So you
I
don't
could see
really.
these become a lot more popular going forward.
Yeah, Icy Tails, like we said, are also being printed as off finishers. The most notable of which right now is the Kurumi off finisher from Dateline.
Oh, we loved it.
Notably here, we do not have the Data Live version of the Kurumi, but probably the version of Icy Tail at the moment that you're most likely to see in English, which is the Kurumi from Fujimi, which spawns additional copies of itself on play from deck, and then I might be able to Icy Tail you for 4 for every copy on attack with the pants as a climax combo. But just as an example of something you might see in English if you're someone who plays in a mostly English-only area. We can move
They're
on.
coming.
So this is
All right.
Brian, right?
Up next, we've got the camera effect, or as we like to call it, the Mil4 event.
Or
This
the S tier card
is,
effect if you watch a lot of our content.
this is an event profile that's printed pretty aggressively in probably like literally every set at the very least recently. Lets the player who plays it look at the top 4 cards of their deck, choose a character, usually on trait from among them, add it to their hand. 1-for-1 trade event for character. So it's a fine way to dig through your deck. Gets you 4 cards down.
Notably, it is up to, so it has a high amount of deck manipulation.
It is up to.
Being able to stop, very important for bottom of deck refreshes, especially in decks that have the ability to bond back to these events, that you can reuse them constantly. They can be your sort of one-stop mill engine for your deck if the deck has the right support for the event. So, pretty powerful. I know Andy's a big fan. Sitting there with a big smile on his face.
They're definitely getting printed. I think Brian mentioned it like in trial decks a lot. Like it seems like every trial deck has either a camera event or a cigarettes event, which is something we'll be talking about in a few slides.
Yeah, they're very similar.
This is like baby's first event card, you know, like
it
most
really
new
is,
players who get a trial deck, it's like this is your first exposure to events.
As we get through them, the important thing to remember that is unique to the camera is the up to. The other ones that we look at next will not have the ability to stop. Which, getting into that, is the Operation Tornado. This card has the Brainstorm keyword, so you literally cannot stop. These cards will go to the resolution zone, meaning that if you play this with two or less cards at the bottom of your deck, these cards will stay in the resolution zone, similar to an actual Brainstorm, and you must mill the next card off the top, and while the event is still resolving. So on play, you will Brainstorm 3. You add a character from your waiting room back to your hand where the level is X or lower, X being the number of characters revealed by that Brainstorm. So possibly up to a level 3 or lower. You can add something back to your hand. If you play mostly English, you probably know this from Warehouse rather than Operation Tornado, despite it being printed in Angel Beats First, as the Christmas Cost Me combo that brings this event back was very widely played when Bang Dream was the hotness, which was for a good bit there, around when I started playing.
Just to clarify, the event card stays out over refresh 2, right? So like in the example you gave where you mill 2 cards.
Yes, the event stays out as well because it was still resolving.
Yeah, the event doesn't go back to waiting room until the entire effect of the event is resolved. So until the brainstorm is completed and the effect is completed off of the brainstorm.
This effect,
important to know, yeah.
This event card has a lot of variations. There's the Return by Death, which gives additional power and goes to memory, which is a 1/1 version. Lots of sort of spins off that. But a lot of people will refer to all these sort of effects. If it is a Brainstorm for 3 event, they'll call it a Tornado. So just be aware of that. Pretty simple, though. Most of these events are. Moving on. Back to Andy.
Yep, next we got cigarettes, which are named after the card 2 cigarettes from Fate Apocrypha. I was forgetting which one it was there for a second. Similar to the camera events, it just lets you turn this event card in your hand into any other card from a zone, depending on what you hit. The camera events will work off of your deck. The cigarette events are going to mill 2 cards, add the levels together, and then salvage something of that level or less. You see these a lot in trial decks nowadays. Usually, if it's not in a trial deck, just as like a pack filler sort of card, these are usually part of like climax combos for level 1 combos. So combos that will either add these cigarette event cards back to your hand, or sometimes they've been starting to print them on like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Slime have effects that are like on attack combos, mill 2 cards and then take something back.
And a lot of people will just call those cigarettes even when they're on climax combos. They'll just say on attack cigarettes and expect you to know what it is. So
to be honest, I'm kind of surprised that cigarettes is the first printing of the card.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not, it's definitely the most ubiquitous at this point.
You'll sometimes hear people call this tobacco if they played Fate Apocrypha before it was translated into English. But it's cigarettes. Cigarettes are cool. I don't make the rules.
How did it take them that long to print that effect? Like, I think the camera and Mill 4 events have been around for like
a lot of event profiles.
Operation Tornado came out like Angel Beats was one of the first sets. That's
Yeah.
some boomer shit there, dude.
Yeah, for English, but like cigarettes, when Bushiroad like settles on an event profile, it just starts showing up everywhere. Events are they come up with one and then they just get copy pasted to every effect. So it makes sense that it's like Apocrypha, and then we see it in everywhere after Apocrypha.
Yeah.
So thankfully, it has a cool name though. Cigarettes. Short, sweet, to the point. Bad for you. Bad for your second deck, but good for the soul. Willing to. All right, moving on.
All right. Next, we've got money counter, which is the term used for any event counter that reads, "Play this event. Choose one of your opponent's characters." Is it character in battle usually, or is it any
Character in
character?
battle? Yes.
Choose one of your opponent's characters in battle. That character cannot deal damage to you until the end of this turn.
That includes any like on reverse or at end of combat damage originating from that card,
Right.
such
Any
as
damage
like burns.
any damage coming from that card past the point that this event was played. So this effect does not block any sort of on attack burn, but anything past that is blocked.
Notably, in Japan, they call this horror more often than not because the Kappa is so popular, and that's where that event is played the most.
Mhm.
Whereas over
Yeah.
here, we call it the Little Busters version, which obviously is called money counter because it's got a what is it, 10,000 yen bill on it.
Slam the money, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most commonly in English, you'll see opposition by the shield and Sorted Online.
Yeah, it's a green
As-
counter with Uno on it.
As
That's
an
what I was
example of
gonna
this.
say. I think that's the only like, or at least the first one we had in English was the opposition by the shield.
No, it was To Lover. To Lover is the first one. Project Darkness, the first money counter for English.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Back in its day, probably people rolling in their graves, they hear To Loveru, Project Darkness. Was very
Yeah.
over centralizing to the meta back in the day.
The Weiss boomers.
Mm-hmm. The Weiss boomers. But yeah, if you're in Japan, you probably call this core. The Capo is unbelievably popular. Probably now even more so because they got a new set. But yeah, we can move on. Wish, also known as Sayaka's Wish, a healing event that can be used as a sack counter that goes to memory on play. And when you play it, either in main phase or as a counter, you heal the top card of your clock to your hand while you're resolving the effect. So it's a heal counter and a sack counter. Two very powerful effects in one. Obviously popularized by Budoka. Was a linchpin of their strategy, especially in English, for a long time. And even with Magi, a record, saw a lot of play with the Sayaka that bonds to it. Even in JP, not seeing as much play now with the new Madoka stuff, but still a very powerful effect. It's in a lot of sets. You'll hear people call it as like, what is it? In like Vivid, they'll call it like Rene's Wish because it targets Rene. There's a lot of different printings of the effect.
Yeah, you get
Mayuri's Wish. Yeah, Mayuri's Wish.
Gate, yeah.
Common denominator is they usually work with a specific character.
Yeah, specifically named character.
'Cause these events are really strong. I mean, I know we didn't start playing the game until, a little bit more recently, but I'm one of those, Weiss boomers who was like researching the game and, learning about it like years and years and years ago and always wanted to play it, but never did. And like, I know the Sayaka's Wish was like a huge part of the metagame. That was like a big fucking deal.
The one cost heal one sack
Yeah.
counter.
It's still a good card, yeah.
And goes to memory, right?
Yep.
Which was like not a common thing at all back then.
But yeah. Just as an idea, this can get, even if it doesn't counter like a specific card, I believe there's one in Overlord where it has a sort of condition, and it's not even a sack counter, it's like a 2-1 heal that you play as a counter that has to have a certain field condition. People will call that Wish too. Like any 2-1 counter that heals to hand, people will call it Wish. So, just to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the top, Andy.
Next up, we got Leafa Counter, named after Leafa from Sword Art Online. These are just 2/1 2500 counters that have the additional effect when you use them. You reveal top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you draw it and then discard a card. On the surface, might not seem like a very useful card, as you're giving up some power on your backup just to be able to like maybe filter your hand at first glance. But the fact that you get to actually remove a card from your deck as your opponent's attacking you is really good to help you cancel damage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've all had those times where it's like, man, if I would have like canceled one more card, I would have canceled that big attack. So that's kind of what Leafa counters let you do, especially since they don't activate on climaxes. So if you reveal a climax card with the Leafa counter, it fortunately gets to stay on the top of your deck for you, and you get to cancel the attack.
At best, it's a one stock money counter. Depending on your deck state, you really, when you're playing these kinds of cards, you can do the math, and if it increases your ability to cancel based on your deck state and your ratios by a significant amount, like a no-brainer, you play it there, even if it doesn't win you the lane or you're already winning the lane. If you need to cancel, they're very strong effects because they're so aggressively costed.
And more recently, they're starting to print these card profiles as level 1 cost 1 backups, 2000 power. They do the same
1/1/2 case.
Yeah, the same top check, add to hand, filter, or leave the climax their effect as the Leafa punch.
You know any Weiss boomers that have been around for a while? They might call this the board encounter, coming from the Board Savers blog due to one of the author's love for the effect. We have the link down there to the blog. Some really funny, great articles on there. Definitely check that out if you're looking for some Weiss content. Even though it's old, it's very good, very funny. Love it. But yeah, you'll definitely hear this called a board encounter, for sure, depending on where you hang out and talk about Weiss. Heard that probably just as often as Leafa counter. All right. Moving on. I think this is the last one here.
Yeah, unfortunately, our time here is coming to an end. Our last card profile to talk about is Gloves, which is a 1/0 event counter that gives power to one of your characters equal to 500 times the number of your stock. So it gets larger and larger based on the amount of stock that you have. Not super commonly played, but a pretty powerful card in any deck that builds stock very aggressively.
Commonly came from Rewrite, where their strategy was literally to just stock charge themselves to the moon and then win board the rest of the game by using the Gloves counter. But shows up in other sets too, in English, Gun Gale.
Yeah, you might hear this. Yeah, might hear this effect referred to as Peachon in English.
JP Cardcaptor Soccer also notably plays Gloves. I think Rewrite's really the big one. But important effect to be aware of. If it's anything times your stock, people will probably call it Gloves in some way because of how important this card was to the meta at the time. Rewrite was like a massive part of the meta for a good bit, and it was because of this card. Not a lot of decks could deal with it, and it had a pretty oppressive Nextsoul combo, and then you also couldn't kill it because they had so much stock. So that's why it has that name. The most important printing of the effect for sure. But yeah, I think that's all the terms, right?
Yeah, was there anything we forgot? I guess if we forgot anything, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, definitely let us know. We've been here for quite a bit. It's been like about over an hour and 20 minutes. Lots of terms. We wanted to put these in one big video all in one spot. We will link the Google Sheets compiled by Kevin below if you guys want to have a reference. Make sure you bookmark that. If players are looking for like a primer, definitely direct them to this video. Direct them to the Google Sheets. Also, these links that we drop at the end of all our videos, we don't operate or own any of these pages, but these are where we hang out, card games and competitive Weiss Schwarz Discord. If you want to talk about Weiss, get some webcam games, get some PS games, this is where you want to go. Looking to buy, sell, trade, or talk about cards on Facebook, you want to go to the global community or the NA group. And then we also have all our Twitters for all our recurring cast. Upcoming content, we got Amagi a record in the pipeline, trying to get that together, and also Frozen Bonds. Those are our big next things for set reviews. And then our rush rundowns on Wednesdays, got a couple more of those to get through before we go on break. Because of no events, we want to make sure we get the meta accurate for the English meta videos out there. Instead of sort of guessing based on the JP stuff that we have, we want to make sure they're English focused, make sure that we're giving you guys the right information. So once events resume, after Slime, we will blaze forward with things that we have. And then also our deck techs every other Friday.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say this too. Like, for the love of God, please share this video.
Yes,
with
please.
everyone you know. Not because we want the clout, which we do, but definitely share it because, you know, games of Weiss Schwarz can last forever. And, like, being able to have some of this common terminology, especially with sets that come out so frequently, you know, there's a lot of times people are like, what's that card do? What's this card do? And, you know, that's like the one thing that makes games of Weiss Schwarz take a long time. Because, like, I know at our locals, like, we're not really strict with time or anything. But I know a lot of locals are. Like, they have, like, a 30-minute time limit, and they're super strict with it.
One
And
of
with,
the fast...
newer players getting into the game, like, if you don't... A lot of this stuff's, like, not inherent terminology, and it's something that speeds up the game so well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for a while, it was pretty, like, contentious what to say was a... community accepted term, what was this, what was local jargon, blah blah blah. But again, like, sort of in the same vein, I gotta shout out Kevin at Kilua. You've probably seen him on Encore decks putting up stuff. Like I said, he's the Anime Evo champion. This guy puts in, like, a ton of work compiling a ton of resources. He pulls in a ton of JP, like, topping deck lists. You've probably seen him on Encore decks if you frequent there. He's the one who compiled and curates this jargon list, which is where we referenced for a lot of these terms, especially ones that we had outside our local meta, things like that. He definitely deserves a shout out. If you see him in Card Games Discord, where he frequents a lot, make sure you thank him for all that he does. He definitely doesn't give enough credit. But yeah, definitely send this to your people, have them take a look, send them the Google Sheets. The time, Weiss Schwarz games are 30 minutes, and then if you're in English, they're turns, and if you're in JP, it's double loss. Anything that can save you time when explaining an effect to someone is very important, and these community terms are about the only way to do it in a meaningful way. So definitely shout this around. And I think that's it.
That's it.
That's
All right.
it.
Pittsburgh Weiss Schwarz signing off. We'll see you guys in the next one.